Distracted by the finer things in life. He looks shattered and he's broke. And all you have to do is find that guy who's perfect for you. And the fine line between wrong and right.
Meeting someone, falling in love, having a baby. These are some of life's greatest moments, or they should be. But in 2013, one young mother's life reached an horrific premature end.
Everything was going well for her. She was beautiful and had been a contestant in Miss Africa. She'd been a model. In 2009, she met the man who went on to kill her.
Lena Kzer lived here amongst one of these flats we see here, and it was here where she met her death. She lived in fear for the last days of her life.
Sometimes hopes and dreams shatter, and the very people you trust and feel safest with can become a danger to you.
There are lovely parts of Leighton with plenty of beautiful housing, affordable to most people, and with easy access to the city and to London. It's a nice place to live.
In 2012, the London suburb of Leighton was home to 29-year-old Lena Kzer. Lena was very close to her older brother, Ivan.
She used to enjoy life as a normal person. She grew up in a Christian family, but as she was growing up, she got her education.
The family's roots were in Africa.
Lena came from a very educated and, I would say, elite family in Rwanda. She was someone who seems like she was a very vibrant and loving person, and certainly her family absolutely adored her.
We grew up in a Christian family. My dad was a reverend of a church. My dad did everything to make sure that he educated not only boys, but also girls as well.
In 1998, Ivan left war-torn Rwanda to try and build a new life in the UK. Almost 10 years later, in 2007, Lena followed in his footsteps.
When she came here first time, she stayed with me, but then she moved over to Wolverhampton because that's where she applied for higher education.
For Lena, moving from Rwanda to the UK would have been a huge move in all sorts of ways, culturally, lifestyle, but she took the big step and came here.
Amazingly, Lena, when she came over here, she settled in easily. Her character is like, she takes things so easy.
While in London, Lena had a big impact on everyone she met and soon became involved in modelling.
She met up a guy somewhere here in London where he used to be a photographer. And from there, he just decided to take her on. And just from then, she was into modeling. That's how even I remember the first time she told me, I said, what? She was doing that and doing whatever she wanted to do. Yeah, and it was working for her.
Lena was beautiful, kind, charming, and highly intelligent. She was studying for a bachelor's degree at the University of Wolverhampton. The future seemed bright.
She wanted to be a social worker. We have evidence of her trying to get into the university to do a programme to help her qualify here.
She knew that one day when she goes to Rwanda, she's going to change how they do their social working in Rwanda.
It wasn't all work for Lena. She also continued with another of her loves, dance.
She had so many friends, people around her. She was a good dancer, every type of dance, but normally she wanted to dance our traditional dance because even when she came over here, she created her own group.
It was through her love of dance that in 2009, Lena met a man, David Gikawa.
Lena was from a Rwandan background. Gikuwa was from a Ugandan background, but they met at a Rwandan dance night, and outwardly charming, they fell in love.
The first time I was scared as a big brother, and then I said I want to know the person, I want to see the guy, and then when I saw him, then okay, you know, like the normal person, she's grown up, she makes her own decisions. So I just respected the way she handled the whole thing.
In 2010, Lena added another string to her bow when she became a contestant in the annual Miss Africa competition.
I remember when she wanted to join Miss Africa, it was a joke, but for some reasons, she just go with it.
It was during the competition that she got some surprising news that changed her relationship with David.
She became pregnant in around 2010. I think things started to go wrong. She was dependent on him financially. I also think that she probably felt quite ashamed about being pregnant, and she also probably really wanted things to work out.
Lena kept her pregnancy quiet for as long as she could. She graduated university, and she and David decided to leave Wolverhampton.
She moved to London, which meant that she was kind of isolated from her family, even though her family were very loving and supportive of her.
I didn't even realize that she was pregnant. But then, because it was the first pregnancy, so I thought she just put on weight. One day I confronted her, and then she told me that she was pregnant. And by then, I think she was 8 months pregnant. Then she told me not to tell my mom. Of course, I say I can never hide it away from my mom, so I had to ring my mom. When I spoke to mom about it, my mom took it easy, said, that's fine. The baby's gonna come, we're gonna look after the baby, that was it.
At the start, Lena and David had a good relationship, but it went downhill when she became pregnant and they relocated to London.
That's when it also started to get violent. So he was financially abusive, but he was emotionally abusive and verbally abusive. He was also physically abusive.
When the violence happened the first time, I told her I'm going to confront him. But she tried to calm it down. I said, no, you leave it, I'll deal with it. I have to confront him. No, she just asked me to calm down, to wait and see. But again, it didn't stop. It kept on going throughout her pregnancy until she had a baby as well. Still the same. To the extreme that she came, she was scared even to call on anybody in front of her.
Domestic abuse is all about power and control, and it's one person believing they have the right to control another person. We all identify, or most people identify, domestic abuse as physical violence, broken bones, black eyes, but actually domestic abuse can be many other forms. It could be being controlled financially or sexually, psychologically, technologically, a really wide range.
In September 2010, David and Lena's baby was born, but the abuse at home continued to get worse.
She told me that she was having a problem one day because, normally she said, is there a way, she came one day, she asked me, is there a way you can go and tell him off never to touch me again? But in the beginning I thought, what happened? She didn't want to give me the whole details until her friends started telling me.
It's sad to say, but a lot of individuals tend to tolerate abuse from their partners for multiple reasons. One of the main ones being fear. They're scared of the actions and the consequences of leaving their partner.
I managed to go to the guy. I even told him, really, what you're doing is wrong for a woman. And he denied everything. Again, they stayed together for that moment.
From what we understand about her relationship, from the get-go, this was an on-again, off-again relationship, which was described as very turbulent, and it was not unusual for the police to be called.
He was hitting her, putting the pillow in her face, covering her, to suffocate her. Not once, he's done it many times. I was worried. I rang her when she was that time telling me what happened. I said, do you know what, that man is going to kill you.
Parents will always try and do what they think is best for their child. Lena's family and friends were beginning to fear for her safety.
So we know of 2 incidences, one in 2011 where he attempted to strangle her, which is a big red flag in domestic abuse situations.
There was a watershed moment where Gikawa had tried to strangle her. And this clearly was that this couldn't go on. He was not going to be reformed. Whatever the issues, she had to get herself and her daughter out of this clutches of this man.
In March 2011, 36-year-old security guard David Gikawa attacked his partner Lena. She called the police, but he was released without charge.
Gikawa was a prolific violence offender. It was known to authorities that he was violent, yet for some reason, the police did not take this case seriously. And this tends to be the case in domestic violence settings.
Every day, police attend domestic violence calls, and very often nothing is done. The victim doesn't want to go ahead with it. But we need to understand domestic violence more than ever. In this particular case, he was controlling. She called the police for help.
In a domestic violence cycle, tension builds. The person then explodes. Then they feel remorseful. And it's in this remorseful period where the victim may think, oh, all right, they're being nice to me. And then you go through this whole cycle again, the tension building, the rage, the explosion.
Over the next month, the violence escalated and the police were called again.
There was also an incident where he assaulted her and held a knife in her mouth and threatened to kill her. Now, both of those incidents, the police were called, but neither of them resulted in a prosecution.
From the outside looking in, people may think, why don't you just get away from this person? Why? Because he's so awful to you. But from the victim's point of view, it's an incredibly difficult thing to do. There's fear at the heart of this. What is going to happen next? Imagine living like that, not day to day, but moment to moment. That can destroy a person.
In 2012, Lena took their baby and moved out of the flat she and David shared.
Lena quickly realised she had to get out. He was violent towards her. He told her that if he couldn't have her, no one would. He wouldn't allow anyone to have her.
He managed to control her. The way he even came in, banging the doors, entering, but she just tried to calm it down.
With domestic violence, very often the victim doesn't want to pursue an inquiry, doesn't want to pursue the investigation because they are being controlled and they don't want to go ahead with the investigation. And they also believe that next time it won't happen. He'll change his ways.
Lena had finally had enough. But would David accept that it was over between them? Lena moved to a new flat in Walthamstow, but David soon followed her there.
When I was there trying to do a bit of renovation, painting the house, and he came over there, he didn't even want to go. Because of Lena's character, he just told, let him stay and then ask him to help her, and he stayed.
Acting like nothing had changed, David had persuaded Lena that they were still a couple. However, the violence now started to spread outside the house.
They were in a club somewhere here called Kent Road. For some reasons, David got angry, agitated, and grabbed her neck and threw her in the car and drove back home. But her friends called the police and sent them there. The police came, they found Lena was on the floor, David on top of her with a knife. And actually, he punched through the carpet and she was moving ahead. The police came in. When they came in, they took him. All they've done is just arrest him for one night.
Even though she'd involved the authorities, it seemed as if Lena's pleas were falling on deaf ears. Meanwhile, David's behaviour was getting more and more frightening.
Lena reached out to the police. She spoke to them and she told them that Gikawa was being abusive towards her. Gikawa was stalking her. Gikawa threatened her.
He didn't want anyone else to have her. He wanted to control her, and because he couldn't have her, he had a violent background and clearly a drink problem. He had all the classic symptoms. All the alarm bells were ringing.
They stayed together, I think, because Lena wanted to do what was best, what she thought was best for their daughter, to try and establish a stable family background.
She was one of the best mother. She loved her baby so much. It was like, it was her life.
She was very loving of her family and in particular her daughter. And I think all of her, she was motivated by wanting to have a good, supportive life full of opportunity for her daughter.
At the end of 2012, Lena needed a break. She took her daughter and flew to Africa to visit her sister. Here she finally revealed the truth about David.
She'd gone back to see her family. She told her sister that he was threatening. He threatened to kill her.
She spent very important, special time with her sister. In that time, she did share with them that the relationship with Gikawa was falling apart, and that she was planning on leaving him. And they were supportive to her in doing that.
It was so painful. I remember my sister back home in Rwanda, she was crying, telling David, why can't you just leave her? Why can't you just leave her? Because it was too much.
On average, it takes a woman around 7 attempts to leave an abusive partner before finally leaving. Leaving is a process. It's very complex. It's not easy to make a decision to change your life.
When she came back, she asked him if he can leave. That's why, that's it. He didn't want to leave.
Lena was determined. It became clear she would have to be the one to make the break.
In around May 2013, she decided that she was going to leave him, and she did everything she possibly could. She asked him to leave the house. She tried to get her keys off him, but he kept on coming back. She'd wake up and he'd be there staring at her. He became more and more erratic.
He was started stalking her. Like, actually, full time, he stalked her all the way.
She finally packed her things and moved to Leighton.
In 2013, she told him, that's it, it's over. 4 years is enough, we're walking away. And that sparked the inner rage within Gikawa himself that he was not going to allow this to happen.
After years of abuse at the hands of her boyfriend David Gikawa, Lena Kzer had moved into a new flat with her daughter.
Lena had only moved to this flat when she ended her relationship with Gikawa to get away from him to a place where she thought she and her 2-year-old daughter would be safe.
Lena would have felt very afraid. She was desperate and did as much as she could to protect herself and her daughter from harm.
I think it would have been incredibly difficult for Lena to leave this guy because she also had a child with him. Now, people in this kind of domestic violence web, what's going on for the abuser is that they feel they have the right to totally control somebody else's existence.
In July 2013, she started to get very worried because essentially he was stalking her. He'd appear at her house. She'd see him regularly outside the window. and she started to do everything that she could to protect herself.
It was becoming like so controlling, so much of tormenting. I don't know how I can describe how those last weeks.
She sought help. She saw a solicitor. She wanted him to be arrested for stalking, harassing her. She was trying to get an injunction. She wanted to take action.
So she went to a solicitor to try and get an injunction or a non-molestation order against him. And there is a statement that she wrote that she gave to the solicitors. That injunction was never, in fact, filed.
By late July, things were reaching a head.
On the 23rd, he came, he had a knife there. He said, look, I'll kill anyone who is gonna come next to you. She managed to text her friend in Uganda to ring the police here in the UK, but just texting. Can you just call the police?
999, which service do you require?
The police turned up, but they assessed the situation as standard risk, which is the lowest level of risk. She called them again the following day. Now, when a domestic violence incident happens, the police are supposed to look back on the history of whether there's been previous domestic violence incidences.
There was strict protocols in place which the police had instituted some years earlier to deal with these sort of domestic incidents, stroke honour killings, stroke stalking. And that involved a 5-year intelligence check on the suspect. They didn't do it.
If you see from the 23rd, you could see she knew someone was going to kill her.
All the alarm bells were ringing. Nobody was listening. More should have been done to protect Lena.
On the evening of 28th of July 2013, David Gikawa was continuing to stalk Lena and was outside her flat.
She phoned the police 3 times, telling them, this man's got a knife, he's already slashed one of my friend's car's tyres, he's outside. I'm so scared, I can't breathe. Eventually at 1 a.m, 2 police constables turned up. She showed them evidence of the fear that she was living in, the slashed tyres. She taped Gikawa threatening her, albeit in Ugandan, but the tone of her voice would have been unmistakable.
Which is obviously an incredibly intimidating and dangerous thing to do. They didn't take the details of the friends who were witnesses in terms of the harassment that she was suffering. They didn't take the details of the children who were at the house, and they assessed the case as medium risk.
She told them, you've got to save me from this man.
With the assessed risk increasing, the police filed another report and requested David contact them if he wanted to visit his daughter or attend Lena's flat for any reason. Ivan, by now very concerned, spoke to his sister.
She was still worried. She was so worried about him. And she was saying to me, he sent a coffin, a candle, a cross, and a bow to her on the mobile phone. So I said, did he send you that? I said, yeah. So the man is going.
One of the vulnerabilities for sure that Lena would have had was isolation. She would have found it extremely difficult to confide in someone, a friend, a family member. So the fact that she approached the police just goes to show how desperate she was and how isolated she would have felt because of what she was going through.
She told me that it's like I'm in prison in my own home. I said, okay, do you know what? Why can't you come over, stay here for a while? She told me, don't worry, I told people that I'm going on holiday. So she was planning to go to see, to visit her other friends.
Gikawa was trying to get in contact with Lena. She was refusing to speak to him. He was knocking on her door. He was trying to communicate with her. whether it was by phone or face-to-face. And as such, Gikawa clearly snapped. He wanted to control Lena, but she wasn't giving him the opportunity to do so.
Frustrated by the lack of contact, David Gikawa asked the police for permission to collect his belongings from Lena's home.
He had to apply to the police first to make sure he didn't misbehave. So he phoned the police and said, I want to pick up my personal items. The call was taken. The police sergeant, who should have, again, followed the protocol set down on how to deal with these matters, and that is to carry out a 2-year previous check on Gikawa's record. He didn't. He said they had no officers available to go with him, so he said, well, why don't you go along? I'm sure it'll be fine. And he closed the file. And that, as the family believe, and I think very reasonably believe, was a fatal decision.
There were 26 hits on David Gikawa, that he carried a knife, that he was dangerous.
He didn't want anyone else to have her. The days leading up was systematic. He was in control. He didn't want anyone to have her. He was determined to kill her.
At about 4 a.m. on the 31st of July 2013, Gikawa let himself into Lena's flat in Leighton.
And on that fateful night, he had a key, let himself in.
He grabbed Lena by the throat. She let out screams of terror, which her neighbour overheard, and instead of going back to sleep and ignoring it, he immediately ran to Lena's front door. Banged on. She could hear her shouting, kick the door in. But he couldn't get in because Gikawa had his back to the door so that he couldn't force his way past.
Gikawa stabbed Lena once. She was clearly suffering. He knew that he had full control of her, yet he still stabbed her again. And this just goes to show and reiterate and reinforce Gikawa's violent nature. He was in full control, which is something that he wants always with Lena, yet he was not willing to let go.
Gikawa had his hand round Lena's neck and then stabbed her brutally, and the neighbour managed to get in, forced his way in, and Gikawa, like a coward, ran away.
What he saw was the most horrendous sight of this poor girl lying in a pool of blood.
She died of her multiple stab wounds. And that neighbour, traumatised, and just couldn't get there. And he's got to live with that for the rest of his life, poor man, that he tried everything and heard those screams, but it was all too late.
On the 31st of July, Lena's brother Ivan received a number of calls.
When I woke up, I had some few phone calls. I ignored them because I was getting ready. I don't want to be late to go to work.
I saw this text message. Oh, someone just said, I'm so sorry about your sister. She's been stabbed. I said, what? And I rang their number, and then they told me. I couldn't believe it. Actually, in my head, straight away, if it wasn't David, there was nobody. I jumped on a train going to Leighton. The train was so slow, I was like, I can't believe this. And then I'm trying to ring home. They don't know what I'm talking about. I'm trying to ring some friends. I say, can you confirm? You know, all these things, not even me, no one even could understand. And then, until about 8 o'clock, when everything just blew out from the media, the news.
David had fled to avoid facing the consequences of his horrific actions. The police launched a manhunt.
He intended to kill her. This wasn't a case of manslaughter, and it wasn't a whodunit. All the elements were there to prove murder in this particular case. However, there were also all the elements to prevent her from dying. There should have been early intervention.
In Leighton, East London, former model Lena Kzer had been stabbed to death by her ex-partner David Gikawa while her 2-year-old daughter was in the flat.
These are the flats where Lena Kzer lived and where she was brutally murdered. She lived the last days of her life here in her own home in a state of fear.
On July 31st, having received news about the attack, Lena's brother Ivan arrived in Leighton.
The place was cordoned off with the police. I said, I've got my sister living here. And one of the officers asked me, which is your sister? I said, Lena. Is she fine? Because I thought she would maybe just a stabbing, she'll be fine. The next thing, one of the liaison officers came to me. For the first time, I thought she's in the hospital maybe. So I wanted to know which hospital she's in. Until one of the officers came to me and say she was killed. I thought, if this is a dream, please let me wake up. I don't want to. It was so painful. It was one of the worst dreams.
After hearing the news of her violent death, Lena's devastated friends and family struggled to comprehend what had happened.
The only thing I asked, did he break in the house? They said no. The door was open. So I don't know if he managed to manipulate her to open the door or what he did. I just realized, okay, my sister's gone.
Gikawa had fled the scene. The police needed to find him fast.
When you launch a manhunt, particularly when you know this guy is guilty of murder, we know that he's murdered Lena, so immediately you do media, release his photograph to the media. We know who's done it, there's no question of that. There's a witness, there's forensic evidence.
Of course, the police asked, because the first thing I said, I know it's him. They said, who? And I said, David. So do you know him? I said, I know him. Of course, they called me on the side. I said, there's no one else. I said, just look for him.
And then you do an all ports warning, let the airports, let ports know, let all police organisations across the country know.
He was trying his friends to give him a passport so he can just go. But some of his friends, some other guy said, you're not gonna go. The other guy just realized what he done. And he just said, look, you're not going nowhere. So he just refused to give him his passport.
As the hours went on and the alarm had been raised, and he realised that his own home would be the first place the police would go to, he realised he had no place to go. And so later that day, he gave himself up at the nearest police station.
David had given himself up and was now safely in custody. But if police thought this might lead to him doing the right thing and admitting his guilt, they were sadly mistaken.
So after he killed her, he fled the scene, he was chased, the police arrested him, he was arrested for murder, and there was a trial.
Lena's death had resulted from years of abuse at the hands of her partner. But despite this, Gikawa was still pleading his innocence.
The very tragic case of Lena being murdered was deeply shocking and upsetting. We read about the case in the press and we made an approach to her family, to her brother Ivan, and developed a relationship at that point to offer support to the family.
Due to his not guilty plea, David Gikawa went on trial at the Old Bailey on the 22nd of April 2014, charged with Lena's murder.
As soon as arrived at court and could find out before the trial started what the issues were, it became very clear that this wasn't an old-fashioned murder in the sense of who done it. It was much more, why was it allowed to happen? And that the jealous boyfriend was obviously going to be found guilty.
The family were made to endure the trial. One of the things that caused the family a lot of pain was that he sort of talked badly of her, despite everything that he had done.
Trial. It was another trauma because it took a while as well. It took us nearly a month. Yeah, it was so sad the way he tried to slag off Lena. The way he tried to disrespect her. He didn't even give her a chance to rest in peace.
During the trial, a picture emerged of David Gikawa as a very violent man.
The trial was all about David Gekow and his violent background and his violent tendencies, and the evidence, obviously, of the murder, of how he had done it and why he had done it.
His background was scary, and I don't even know how he managed to get away with the whole thing. Because if you see his origin from Uganda, the crimes he's done, even the girlfriends he had, the way he was brutally beating them up, I was like, wow, I didn't even know. All that just came out.
As far as I could see, Gekow showed no remorse at all. It was clear that he thought that he had acted reasonably.
He said he was planning to kill her, kill the daughter, and kill himself. They asked him, so why didn't he do it? He says because the knife broke into Lena, so he couldn't do the rest of it. Lie after lie after lie. He lied about everything. He lied his origin. He lied about everything.
Finally, on the 23rd of May 2014, the jury reached a verdict.
The jury's verdict would have come as no surprise to anyone, really, because of the mountain of evidence that the prosecution was able to produce in court to show that he was clearly the killer.
In this particular case, Gekow was what we call banged to rights. He was at the scene, he was seen by a witness, there was intention, there was motive, Lena was his partner, so all the elements to prove this case was there, and obviously an abundance of forensic evidence.
David Gekow was convicted unanimously by the jury of murder, and he was sentenced to life imprisonment, with the judge recommending that he serve a minimum of 21 years before he could even apply for release to the parole board.
I think he's coward. Actually, he's a true representative of a psychopath. And he should know he's a real murderer. So I think he's where he belongs to be.
He's still young enough to live his life again. And in my view, he's still a threat. He'll be a high-risk violent offender. He'll be monitored. But she's lost her life, and who knows what Lena could have become. And that little girl's lost her mum. It's heartbreaking.
David took Lena's life, but he wasn't the only one being investigated. Those closest to Lena wanted answers as to why, despite repeated warnings, he was allowed the opportunity to kill her.
After the trial had finished, the police issued a full apology for their failings, and they acknowledged that they had not shown the service that they should provide to the community.
If all this organization had done more to help her, the police, if they had done a lot, and actually respond to the calls, to the alarm, I think David would have been scared. They could have done better to protect her, to listen to her as well.
As they face up to life without her, Lena's family and friends wanted lessons to be learned from her death.
We were instructed or approached by Lena Kzer's family shortly after her death because they had serious concerns that Lena had been let down by the police.
Lawyer Sophie Naftalin worked closely with Ivan to get to the truth of what went wrong.
Lena had been trying to get protection and help from them, and that they didn't listen. In order to find out what happened and to get to the bottom of it was to engage in the investigation that was undertaken by the IOPC, which is the Independent Office for Police Conduct. And in that process, they gave accounts of their experience. Ivan talked about what had happened and what he had known.
If only the police protocols put in place for exactly this sort of incident had been followed, the police would have been able to protect her, and she would have been taken into a place where she would have been safe. An exclusion zone would have been put around her.
It took around 3 years for that investigation to conclude, which of course was agony for the family. The IOPC found that 3 officers had a case to answer for gross misconduct in terms of the failings of how they had risk assessed the case. those 3 officers, the punishment for having committed gross misconduct is that all 3 of them got a final written warning. Even though the family felt vindicated that these officers had been found guilty of gross misconduct, they found it just shocking that none of those officers lost their job.
This is a truly tragic case, not only because of the brutal butchering of a beautiful young girl, but the mistakes that were made, the police failures to follow their own protocol, is a terrible tragedy, because that ultimately was what led to her death at the hands of Gikuwa. The police were unable to protect her.
Lena might be here today and she'd have seen her lovely little girl grow up, and that will never happen now. Lena's life has gone at the hands of a controlling, coercive, violent ex-partner.
Her family want lessons to be learned from her case and her death to be used as a tool to improve systems so that the same doesn't happen again.
What's so desperately tragic here is Lena's no longer with us. This is a relationship that was dreadful for her, but the connection that she had to him was the 2-year-old, the innocent victim in this terrible, terrible story, aside from Lena, was that child.
Without Lena, it's sad. I really missed her. Now we are trying to bring up her daughter. Now she's with us. And then the connection she was putting more on our family also, I think, the smile, the jokes, the sense of humor. Even her friend, so to a friend, she was a good friend. To a sister, a great sister. As a mother, she was one of the most proudest mother you can never see. She was so happy, so proud of her daughter.
It's easy to end up in a bad relationship, and thankfully, some people escape and are able to try and move on. Tragically, Lena never had that chance.